My name is Julia Kim. I am a Women Techmakers ambassador.
Excellent. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here. Okay, let's just start with your journey in chat tech. And the first question there is, what do you do professionally?
I currently head up revenue operations at an IT services startup here in New York City. And the number one question I always get is, what is revenue operations? What does that have to do with technology? And it's a relatively new terminology. I think most people think of operations as, what are those processes that you need at a company? But in the last few years, most startups, especially ones that are interested in growing and scaling and getting to that unicorn status, have really thought about, well, how do we make operations more efficient? And how do we actually put sort of a measurement around that? Like, what is that metric we're trying to work towards? And so the most obvious choice is obviously revenue. And so what revenue operations is we're actually bringing together technology, so really focusing on the tech stack at a particular company and all the different automations, integrations, customizations that you can do for that tech stack. The data, and data is so important to really know where you are, in terms of measurement. Are you doing what you're supposed to be doing? Are you doing it well? Are there areas for improvement? What other data insights can you actually glean from this process, right, of running your company? And then the people, right, making sure that people know what they're supposed to be doing. Does the sales rep know what they're supposed to be doing? Do they know what they're selling so they can sell it to the right people? So revenue operations really brings together all those different components. And for me, it was sort of the perfect combination of all the things that I love doing. I actually have a technology background. I started out in chemistry as an undergrad. I went to Johns Hopkins. I thought I was going to be pre-med, but but then I actually switched to chemistry because I actually loved chem lab. But one of the things that you end up doing in your last year is really starting to learn programming languages to help you really build out models to understand, what's the probability of an electron being in this location in a particular, element, or, different sort of experimentations to see where different chemical reactions might go, right? And so that's actually how I got into technology, is learning those really basic programming languages to be able to run these simulations. And so when I graduated, I had a choice of whether or not I should be a chemist, right? Because obviously you're going to be what your major was, right, in college, or doing something different. And I remember touring a couple of the really large pharmaceutical companies and being like, wow, this is just not me, right? Because a lot of the people who worked there had their masters or PhDs. They were very much, very much sort of like living in the lab. And I think having graduated from college, I was like, I want to live my life. I want to see what's out there. I want to meet people. I want to see the world, right? And so I ended up going into consulting and using my technology skills, my actual programming skills, to really start applying that knowledge that I learned in real business scenarios, real business use cases. And it just kind of grew from there. I got into databases and data science. I learned a bunch of different programming languages and just kind of kept progressing, but got to the point where my personality is much more outgoing than I think your typical, engineer or someone who works on the engineering side of things. And so I decided to kind of make a switch and work on the operational side, and worked in operations, really focusing on things like CRMs, like building up, the systems that run operations. And fortunately for me, that went well. And, again, like in the last few years, this focus on RevOps has been fantastic because it's really allowing me to take my experience with technology, my experience with data, and my experience with operations, all those processes, right, and bring them together. And the thing that is really special about revenue operations is that it allows a company, especially like a startup that has the typical go-to-market teams like sales, marketing, customer success, finance even. And even though they're trying to do the best in class in those different teams, the real special sauce is revenue operations, because what it does is it aligns all of those go-to-market teams to allow them to work even more efficiently and provide even more automations and even easier sort of facilitation of that customer journey, so that what you think is an optimization on sales is actually optimizing both marketing and CS. So it's kind of like that thing that, you know, you see these different startups and how they succeed, and you're like, wow, they're doing literally the same thing as startup Z over here, but there's something else going on in there, because they're able to get the funding that they need. They're able to get, you know, their customers onboarded faster. They're able to do all these things. And there's always this question of like, what are they doing right? And it's usually something that has to do with revenue operations. And so that's actually what I do on a day-to-day basis. If you think about, there's sort of three core tenets of this sort of methodology, and using RevOps is what we call it in the industry. It's one, really, again, as you were saying, really keeping that customer front and center, right? Because they are the consumers of your product, right? And if you can't get them to be excited and find value in what you're providing, you know, whether it's a service or a technology or whatever it is, right? If they don't see that value, then you're totally lost, right? Because what you're trying to build is not going to have that audience, right? They always talk about your total addressable market, your TAM, or your SAM, your serviceable addressable market. But if there isn't anyone out there who wants to buy what you're selling, then you're screwed, right? And then the second thing is that alignment piece, right? Because as you were saying, like, you had that marketing background, you understand the importance of like what you need to do. But if you're sending out the wrong message and that's not resonating with the people that sales is trying to target, right? You know, through the marketing messages that you're putting together in those campaigns that you have, or, you know, they're not optimizing all of those leads or prospects that you're sending them their way, right? You know, they're sitting on them, or they're not, you know, like responding in a timely manner, right? Because when someone reaches out because of marketing, they're probably interested in buying your product, right? And if you wait like a week or 2 weeks or even a month, they might have asked, you know, another competitor of yours, you know, what are you selling? And it doesn't meet my need. And if it's a yes, they might just go with your competitor, right? You know, if you don't have that alignment, that's a lot of inefficiency in the system. And
well,
so,
and also the next step, which is they are a customer, they wrote their check, and then they're not taken care of. They're not delivered the thing that they just bought. And that's where I've seen companies kind of fall apart, because even if the marketing and the sales and the like, let's close this work, you're not done yet. You know, your tech has to work, your integration has to work, your like that part of delivery and customer success and customer the whole sort of life cycle has to, and RevOps seems to take all of that into account.
Yep. And then the third piece is really, you know, that measurement, right? That data insight, because we talk about data-driven decision-making in the business world. And that's really so that you're not making decisions based on gut feeling, right? Like you might say, hey, it seems like, you know, this marketing campaign is more successful. But is it, right? Like you can actually see how many people clicked on that. Like how many people clicked on that call to action? How many people actually made it through into the sales pipeline, right? How many of those customers actually ended up being customers, right? Because if you start out with 10 leads and only one person becomes a customer, you know, where did all those 9 other people fall out? And what was the issue there? So those are really those 3 components that are so important. And not only that, but really thinking about, you know, that driving metric, right? Revenue. And it doesn't mean that you as a company is, you know, that you don't care about your customers. But the idea is that revenue is a representation of you understanding your customer, you being able to provide technology and automation to facilitate the movement of that customer through that customer journey, and then you being able to interpret all the things that are happening in the business itself so that you can grow that revenue and improve the lives of your customers. And not only that, but your employees, right? Because you were saying, you know, while you're in marketing, it's frustrating when things don't work out the way that you plan, because, you know, you're working your butt off to try and, you know, get the messaging out, get the branding out, right? But if it doesn't work the way that you want, it's frustrating, right? Because you're like, I'm trying to get my job done, but it's not working, right?
Well, and some of it is because like they'll, and again, I'm taking what you're saying and just wanting to push it further. So the metric is, 10 leads, 1 customer. Now I want to look at 10 customers. How valuable are they on your future marketing? How much are they going to add or be a detriment? Are they mad at you, or are they joyful about you and are going to help you get your next 10 leads because they're so excited about the problem you solved for them and how they were treated and how you delivered? And so I look at those customers as part of that marketing pipeline. And because that word of mouth that comes from, yes, they did a great job for me, or, oh, they're terrible, I would never work with them again, matters. And that's taking care of your customers and so the same thing is like, if the branding and marketing is like, we're trusted, well, then go earn your trust. I can tell everybody, I can wave that flag all day long. We're a trusted company. But if you don't earn and keep that trust, then that doesn't resonate in the marketplace. If people are questioning that and are like, well, I'm not sure about that, that really doesn't vibe with my experience of them. Whereas if people go, oh yeah, no, we feel that way, absolutely, then they will tell their friends and other in the industry. And a lot of times, especially when you serve industries, they're small. They all go to the same conferences. You see all the same people. They all talk. And that was where I was talking about that idea of just good operations can sometimes be your best marketing.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the biggest, people tend to think of things like CSAT, customer satisfaction, scores or surveys when they think about measuring like customer satisfaction, right? Sometimes you'll hear about NPS, right? Net promoter scores. But one of the biggest measurements that, companies do need to kind of keep an eye on is this idea of retention or churn, right? Retention being, hey, this customer is happy and they're excited about what's happening. But then churn as in like, hey, this customer is not happy and they're leaving your organization, they're leaving your company to go somewhere else or try a different product, right? And when I think about, again, being on the RevOps side, we tend to focus on the commercial or the go-to-market teams. This totally impacts your product and engineering teams, right? Because for your engineering teams and product teams to be successful in bringing that next iteration of the product or that next iteration of the service, they need to take that information from the customers, right? And incorporate that so they're being even more value. And if there's a gap, right, between what the customer wants and needs and what you have in your product, right, that's an opportunity, right, to promote just new ideas, right, collaboration with your customers and building those features, that idea of product market fit, which is so important, right? Getting an actual data point from your customer and saying, hey, this is not working or this is missing, and being able to build towards it so that other customers can also benefit from that. It's huge, right? And I think that's one of the challenges of many smaller companies or companies that are trying to grow, because they're trying to juggle sales, they're trying to juggle marketing, they're trying to juggle engineering, but really it's a holistic picture, right? You're an organism as a whole, and people forget that. And so I guess that's one of the things that's great about, I think, women tend to do a better job of thinking about things holistically, because you oftentimes, especially if you have a family, you have to juggle so many different things. You have like the minute details of knowing, like, when are my kids supposed to be at school? What day is it? What's happening in the classroom? But then you have to juggle sort of the overarching pieces, which are, how do I make sure that my kids are growing up healthy and happy and, contributing to society in a great way, right? And so these types of roles where you can take so many different pieces of the organization and incorporate them into a single sort of role like RevOps is so important. And one of the reasons why I love talking about technology, because I think that's one of the important levers in all of this, right? You can really have the best people, you can have the best products, you can have the best processes, manual processes, but how do you get it to work at the larger scale? And for that, you have to really think about automation and technology. And so having that background in technology, whether it's in data science or a programming language or even a particular technology itself, so important in having that knowledge and experience to be able to apply within this business setting to help your company run better, right? So,
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I was really, really lucky. Starting at a really young age, my family really believed in, you know, the sciences. I come from an Asian family. They were like, you're going into medical school, you're going to learn science, you know, you need to know math, right? So I grew up in this culture, and I think that was a huge benefit because it made me seek out those opportunities when I was in school to learn more about the sciences, learn more about math. It didn't mean that I wasn't interested in like reading. I actually love reading. I read all the time, is one of my favorite hobbies. And I love hearing about books that other people are reading. But, you know, it has been just one of those things that have it happened to set me on that path that got me to where I am today. And being a woman in tech, it's difficult. You know, there are a lot more men in the industry. And not only that, as you sort of move up in the organization, I'm in a leadership role, a senior leadership role at my point in my career right now, there really aren't that many women. And so you often get a lot of mansplaining. I was actually on a vendor call like a couple days ago where they said, well, I don't know if you know, but you know, you can use email in the cloud. And it's like, okay, yes, I think we all know what Gmail is. So thank you for explaining that to me, right? Like, you know, and you can also, you know, check your email on your phone. Yes, I think we all know what that is now. Like, thank you. But I think it's really important for more women to really think about, you know, because we're so good at this sort of duality, right? We're able to look at things from a really high level, the 10,000-foot view, and then in literally the next second, deep dive into like the details. Really try to look for those opportunities in management or leadership because we need more women in those roles. I remember I was reading this article, I want to say it was like maybe end of last year, that said, you know, only 35% of the top management are women, and more than, like, if you think about the number of women in the workplace, it's over 50%, right? So there are actually more women in the workplace than men. But in top management, it's like less than 35%. I mean, that's sad, right? Especially when you think about just, you know, how much, you know, women can contribute. I think we were talking earlier about your personal background and just the amount of knowledge you had that you could have brought into, you know, a particular organization and really kind of change maybe the trajectory of different things or different projects. Having women, you know, provide different perspectives are so important because if you think about, especially, you know, if you think about engineering product in particular, right? You have product managers who are designing features within a platform, right, that are meant to be used by users. And if half of the users are women, and you mostly have men who are product managers, they might not get the nuances of a workflow that a woman might use that might be different than what a man might use, right? So it's just kind of making sure that we're represented, you know, throughout the organization internally, but then represented externally too, right? In the products we use and the services we use and in the data sets that we generate, just all of it, right? Because it's all intertwined. You know, if you don't have enough data about women, for example, in the healthcare industry, you know, those clinical trials, those sort of analysis and, you know, analyses about different things, you know, reviews of public, you know, studies that are, you know, published. If you don't have enough female data, right, then you have a very, very skewed perspective on what works and what doesn't, right? And so that's why I'm really, really excited about just International Women's Day, the concept of really kind of focusing on women during the months of March and April, because really getting not just representation of women in the org is important, but also externally, again, because we need more representation across the board. And I think it's this idea of just, being able to contribute in your way, your own way, whatever that looks like, it's going to be unique to you. So that we can get these different perspectives, that we can get all of these different views so that we can be inclusive, right? But also really build the best products and services that we can, right? And that won't happen if we're very one-sided, right? I 100% agree. And I think that I think this goes back to a theme that I tend to kind of repeat with a lot of the women. I mentor a lot of young women who are earlier in their career, and a lot of the questions I get tend to be, well, what is that specific thing or the specific things I need to do to get to this place, right? And the assumption is that there is literally a single path that will take you from point A to point B, and you must do all these things. And in order for those things to happen, or in order for that one end goal to happen, you have to finish all of those things. It's like a checklist, right? And the thing that I constantly say is, no. Like, there is a very unique path that you're going to take that's different than the path that I took. That's going to be very different from the path that, you, Philippa, took, right? It's going to look unique to you. And I think, because of society, because of the way that things have been in the past, women are very much in this men's mindset where, hey, I need to do all of these things before I can get to this reward. And I would love, if there's one thing to kind of share and remember or take away, is that you can skip steps, you can go left, you can go right. I think, as you kind of mature in your career path, you'll find that there's just a lot of different avenues that can take you to that place. And part of the sort of magic of that journey is experiencing all those things, right? Because that's what's really going to make you who you are and make you unique and make the value that you're bringing very, very unique, right? And so a lot of the women that I talk to, are like, well, my background isn't this. So when I, apply to a job, or when I do, ask for a promotion, how do I say that I've done these things if I haven't? And it's like, no. Focus on what you've done. Focus on the uniqueness of you, because again, like, the more we're kind of bringing into this sort of picture, the more areas that we can kind of cover. And, as you were saying, it was so tough, right, during the pandemic for us to juggle, right, like our home life, our professional life, and not give things up. And I think that's sort of me hearing you say, hey, it's okay to experiment, right? Try different things out. Don't be afraid if your path might start looking different than what people want or expect of you, right? That's okay. I think one of the sort of ideas behind dare to be, I think it's dare to be me. Is that?
No, it's just dare to be, and then you can fill it ... and you can do dare to be me,
yeah, so
dare to be brave,
dare to be me. But dare to be, right, is don't let others dictate, right, what we can or cannot be, right? And I think this idea of surviving a pandemic, which is a huge deal, right? Surviving economic downturn, which we're currently still in the middle of, huge deal. And it will literally take all of our creativity, all of the support from our communities, our friends and families, and professional acquaintances, and everyone, to really get to where we want to go. And so we need to utilize all of those different resources, right? And again, don't be afraid to take that different path, because it's just not going to be the same for everyone, right? But the benefit of that is, one, you're going to learn so many great things that you didn't expect, right? Two, you're going to really be able to just kind of stretch yourself, right? Like, how exciting is that? We spent the last couple of years just kind of living in this uncertainty, and uncertainty is hard. But the thing is, though, we can set goals for ourselves and really try to move forward, whether it's a small baby step or maybe it's 2 steps and maybe it's 1 step back one day, but we'll keep going. But also really, thinking about like, how can I really change not only myself, but like my community in the future? And it could be literally you, right? Because you think about those great like scientists that, have won Nobel Prizes and stuff. It wasn't a straight path, right? It wasn't like, hey, I'm just going to come up with this amazing cure and I'm going to win the Nobel Prize. I mean, there were a lot of failures. And coming from a startup background, you kind of have to learn to pick yourself up. And I think as women, because we have a lot of obstacles, we're constantly kind of like picking ourselves up and it sucks. But
I refer to that as riding waves. And like we catch a wave and sometimes it ends gracefully. Sometimes it's an epic wipeout, but like you just have to like get back on the board, swim back out, find the next wave. And like my entire career has been these processes of reinvention, because a lot of startups are for the moment. They're solving a problem, like they're very time and they'll solve a problem and some of them sustain and they grow, but others kind of come in and they're or your role at the company is just for what it is, and then it's designed to end and you're designed to go off to the next thing. And I think that's kind of even my last reinvention was I was moving out of Colorado and I was like, okay, what's next? And I was like, go back to school. That's kind of what's going to be my tool for reinvention. And it's been amazing. I just finished a master's in urban planning, but for better or for worse, I fell down the data science hole. Like once they had introduced us to data science and like GIS, I was like, yeah, I want to do that. I want to do that. And I used to, in my like first iteration of college, it was the beginning of the internet, and I learned how to like code HTML to build my first website. And every time I worked with creatives, entrepreneurs, and we had a project, I was always a tech girl. I was always the one who was like, okay, I'll build it. Whatever needs to be built, I will get it, at least a start so that we can. And so I've always been very tech oriented. But that said, let's talk a little bit about education and the role of education for women, and sort of wrapping out with like our both International Women's Day and how we can also use that as a spotlight to bring the importance of education. It hurts my heart when I hear Afghanistan and like women are being excluded from education, let alone we're here talking about women being, excluded from leadership. But like we just, with 8 billion people on the planet, there are so many people who just, and if half of them are women, that's 4 billion women that we should be advocates and voices for their opportunity to be educated. And so I'd love to get just your take on education, opportunity, and International Women's Day.
Yeah, absolutely. So for a little background, I have a full-time job, obviously, doing RevOps, but I also teach part-time through Columbia University here in New York City. And the news is actually great in terms of women and education, especially higher education. So more women have actually been graduating with a university degree than men worldwide. I think it's about 41% of women have some sort of university degree versus 36% of men across the world. And in the US in particular, really women have been outpacing men in terms of masters and PhDs. So huge round of applause to all the women out there. I love that. Like, I love that we are getting educated. I love that we're really focusing on bettering ourselves. And I think that's important, because I think one of the things that I, again, hear when I mentor women is, hey, I get really nervous in speaking up because I don't know everything, right? And to get over that barrier, sometimes it's about educating ourselves. And it can be as easy as learning at your own pace through online tools. There are tons of great free and low cost options. Udemy, edX is another one, Coursera, right? So lots of opportunities to learn very technical concepts like data science. We were just talking about data science. And really kind of thinking about like, where are you in your career, right? And what you're doing. And is this an opportunity to shift, right? So maybe you aren't in a technology role, but interested in getting into technology, taking some of these courses to kind of figure out, like, do I actually like this? And do I want to do this? And then maybe committing to a more formal master's program, or even like an undergraduate program if you're, sort of maybe in high school, right? Thinking about like where you want to go for college. All great opportunities. But I think the thing that is the most important thing about education and learning for women is networking, really using your network, because sometimes, as much as I'm a proponent of more formal education, I mean, also teaching, right? You can learn on the job 100%. There are very, very successful people who have started companies who may not have gone back and gotten their master's, or even learned in that particular industry, like from a academic perspective. They literally decide, hey, I'm going to start a company in this random niche area, and just ran with it, right? And your network is going to help you with that. They're going to be the ones that are going to help kind of help you get what you need to get done, right? If you're trying to go through a program and trying to figure out, like, how do I solve this problem? Where do I get a tutor? What can I, who can I interview for a case study? Whatever it is, right? But they're also the ones that can help you point you in the right direction. And I think your network is, again, even if it's small, that's okay. Because I have women who say, like, I only know my family. Like, my LinkedIn is pretty sad. I have like 5 connections, and that's okay. We all start somewhere, right? And you know what? Your friend, your grandmother might know a neighbor who knows someone else that might get you a job, right? Like, it literally is. I mean, that is the definition of your network, right? Like, it is all those different connections that you can utilize, whether it's friends or family or more professional ones. But I think those are sort of my 2. I forget what the original question was, but the two things that I always say to people is, hey, like, just keep learning. Even if it's informal, keep learning. And then the second thing I always say is, like, really focus on the networking. And I know people are like, ooh, networking, that sounds like a lot of work, or it sounds scary. Then change the word, change the language. Sometimes.
Yeah, my thing is, I love, and I think where I've been very successful at is community.
Yes.
And I saw an image, and I actually have this idea. I'm like, I need to make a YouTube about that. But this idea that's a triangle, and it was really talking about corporate communications and how complicated or simple they can be. And the idea that if you have 3 people on a team, it's for 3 lines, it's really simple communication. But you have 14 people on a team, it like makes it like a doily, and it's a fabric, and it's
network,
and it's really complicated communication. But I saw that and I was like, no, that's community. Because if you have 3 people, like, that's not really but when you sort of have 14 people who all know each other, and even if you have a really light touch into that community, but every day they're building and continuing to grow their relationships with each other, you are so safe in that space. You are so protected in that space. Yep. So to me, it's a club, it's a church, it's an activity, just where there's like frequent community interaction. And you go to those spaces, those people, if they feel like the people, like, that was one of my things. I worked in Hollywood. How do you know you work in Hollywood? How do you know you belong? Well, the people know each other. And how do you know you work in tech? The people know each other. And how are you going to be really safe and supported? The people know each other. And that is, I think, to me, I'm a big proponent of, think of places where 14 people know each other.
Yeah.
And they will help you rise. That's where, like, Women Techmakers is this powerful network. 360 Talk Radio for Women is building that community, that sense of, and sometimes they're virtual, sometimes they're in person. But so I think that a bit of what you're saying about the networking, I think we think of going to an event and having to, like, shake hands and give business cards, but think of, where are those people related to each other outside of that event? So the next time you go to an event and you shake hands and you give a business card to somebody, it's going to kind of come up that you've already had a conversation with that other person. Oh, you know each other, or, it just, I don't know. There's magic in that to me.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. I think your use of the word community is perfect. The one that I tend to use is connections, right? Is making connections, right? It's like connecting the dots, right? And when you think of networking from that perspective, the community perspective, where you're kind of, filling that space around you with people that are going to be supporting you, who know you, who want to get to know you, who want to see you succeed, makes you feel safe, right? And then this idea of building connections, right, is just kind of like making that one step outside of that safe network, right? And meeting others, maybe you had an interest in, I don't know, cooking at some point, right? I'm a terrible cook. But I actually have an interest in it. It's just I'm very terrible at it. But I love meeting people who are like, yeah, this is how you make like pasta. Because I'm like, my pasta comes out terrible, and they're like, no, this is the secret, right? And it's fantastic because you're building these connections, right? And I think people get a little overwhelmed by like, oh my gosh, I need to connect with like someone who's, like a director, or I need to connect with someone at this company. And, I don't know anything about their role or what they do day to day. And that's okay, because we're all humans, right? I'm sure they eat. I'm sure they do something, as a hobby. And maybe that's your in connecting with that person, like getting to know them better and helping them get to know you better. So you can create that connection, right? And then expand your network. So again, you're absolutely right. These organizations like Women Techmakers is so important, not because we're trying to educate women on technology or, provide visibility to the people in the organization, but it's really building that community, as you were saying, building those connections so that everyone can have that safe space and find someone that they have commonality with, right? And be able to take that journey, not alone, right? But together. Because I think that's tough. A lot of times when you're living your life, there are going to be parts of your journey that you're going to be doing yourself, right? And it's tough. But I think there's a lot of opportunity for, education and other types of activities within that journey that you can absolutely do with others, right? And why not do it with others, especially since we've been stuck in this pandemic, right, for a while. I just love, that's one of the other reasons why I love being parts of these types of organizations. You can learn about all the different kinds of stories, the things that people had to go through, because you meet someone, you're like, they seem like they're really happy, like well-adjusted person. But then you find out, oh my gosh, they've gone through so much hardship and they're still happy and, and well-adjusted. And it's amazing. Like there are amazing people that you walk by literally every day, especially here in New York, because there's millions of people here. But, just amazing people that just have these unique stories. And it's just so great to be a part of that organization, to be able to kind of benefit from that and then share, right? Give back.
Yeah.
One of the sort of like tenets of Dare to Be is really to be ourselves. And I think I just wanted to reiterate that, right? Because I think one of the things that's tough, we were just talking about networking, is, you kind of feel like you have to have a very specific persona, right? Or, have a specific way that people might perceive you. And, that can work for some people, but I think it's just much easier to be ourselves, right? We're much more comfortable with ourselves, and then other people can really get to know the authentic you, right? And so don't dare to be, I guess. Don't be afraid to be yourself and see where it leads you, because you are uniquely you, and I think that's okay. It's actually good. It's literally baby steps, right? I was talking to someone about LinkedIn, and she was saying she literally had 5 followers or 5 connections, because she was very early in her career. And I said, that 500 plus that you get once you get over 500 seems so far away, right? And I said, you know that all of us had started with 0, right? Like when we first signed up with LinkedIn, some of us have been around the block a little bit, longer, more often, and so we've had many more years to kind of build up that network, or the number of connections. But we all started somewhere. So yeah, you're just starting, I guess, in 2023, and it's gonna come one step at a time, one connection at a time, one page at a time, and that's
Yeah.
okay, because it's about the journey, right? Like, I think we always focus on that end goal. We're like, oh, we want, I want to get to 500 plus LinkedIn connections, or like, I want to be a data scientist, right? But like, the beauty and the sort of memories that you build are all in that journey, right? Like the times when you're like, oh my God, what was I thinking? This is never gonna work, right? Or like, when someone's like, why did you think that this was a good idea? It's a terrible idea.
Yeah.
I think what also makes it very special is this idea of empathy, right? Because we as people really empathize with that sort of awkwardness, right? The blundering, as you were saying, that that just exists, right, in life, right? Life is chaotic, right? And so, as you were saying, find those empathetic, safe spaces, find those empathetic people who are willing to support you, find those organizations that are empathetic to what your goals are, right? And resonate with what you want to accomplish, because you don't have to be, it's like that they always talk about the toxic friend, right? It's like, ditch that friend. That person is not helping you, right? Gravitate to the people who are empathetic to what you want to be, what you want to accomplish, and make that journey awesome, right? Like, you don't have to go along and make it a slog. I mean, there's going to be parts of life that suck, honestly, but I think, as you were saying, find those communities that lift you up, because they're going to be the ones that you're going to return to over and over again. And when you're in that place where you feel like you can now give back, amazing, right? Because you were able to kind of consume all of that love and attention. And there's going to be a point, a day, where you're going to be like, I'm actually ready. I'm full. Like, I'm actually really, really full. I want to kind of give it back to someone else or the community as a whole. And so, yeah, we don't have to hang out with people who, suck the energy from us. We really should gravitate and be with the people who are going to give us energy and lift us up. Yeah, absolutely. When you're surrounded by people who aren't lifting you up or providing you support, I mean, obviously, especially if you're in a personal relationship, it ebbs and flows, right? There might be times when you're succeeding and they're not, and you kind of have to bring them along the journey, or you're kind of like falling behind because you're dealing with a lot of stuff, right? Whether it be personal stuff or personal things, and they need to kind of bring you along in the journey. But the idea is that, life is too short to spend with people who can't, be there for you and support you, and again, like, be that community for you. And so, or even being the support in the sense that they're the ones that check in with you, saying,
Yep.
how are you doing? I can't be everything and anything you need, but I can at least be here as your cheerleader, right? Cheering you on from the sidelines.